Well, let's get an update now from
3 degrees.
Tell us the latest, please.
You don't understand. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody instead of a bum.
You couldn't rap if you were Father Christmas. Get this bastard dismissed with palms and wristlets. But then you couldn't rap if you were applying the bandage. You couldn't make a rap if it was a type of a sandwich. And it is, clearly you know fuck all. Don't chuckle, you couldn't put raps across your own knuckles. But when I gave you raps, your bones buckled. No troubles, wouldn't go pop if I blow bubbles. You're rapping waistlines like a judo belt. You don't help chatting shit like what a Luro felt. Toilet paper's got better raps, that's very disturbing. Your head couldn't carry raps, wearing a turban. Your shit wouldn't be filed under wraps if it was secret. Secret and rhymes by me, study and be quick. Buddy, believe it, your whole point of view's nullified. The only way you'll be into raps when your whole crew's mummified. And maybe you shouldn't, you couldn't, you kidding? I get you stood on like a yogurt pop. You could not, like a Boy Scout, you could not. You couldn't, you couldn't, you couldn't. Now you denied the mic, let go. You couldn't, why? Cause I said so. I'm that hooligan, smoother than lubricant, too good and your crews wouldn't. You couldn't, I freeze your eyeballs. You still couldn't look cool, shook fool. Couldn't kick it if it was a football. Buried in cat litter, you couldn't get any pussy. See, you couldn't have more exes than me if you took ease. You couldn't be the better man unless we're in the bookies. And when the chips are down, the chips you hold are in your cookies. Look, he's a rookie, in other words an amateur. Drugs, you couldn't push keys if you were a janitor. Still couldn't get your foot in the door. Look at the floor, you couldn't take my right hook to your jaw. You couldn't take a fishing hook to the shore. And if you did, you couldn't catch a cold. If you caught a fish, that would be the only way that you would have soul. And you couldn't understand me if you were the sole of my shoe. If it were true, if only you knew, you still couldn't stop me stepping on the hole of your crew. You couldn't, and maybe you shouldn't. You couldn't, you kidding? I get you stood on like a yogurt pop. You could not, like a Boy Scout. You could not, you couldn't, you couldn't, you couldn't. Now you denied the mic, let go. You couldn't, why? Cause I said so. I'm that hooligan, smoother than lubricant, too good and your crews wouldn't. You couldn't. You couldn't talk up with a wrench spanner. You couldn't spit with a lisp, bust to stammer. I'm untouchable like Elliot Ness or MC Hammer. So you couldn't touch this unless you're a sexy glamour model. You couldn't be this over the top if you're a World Cup penalty taken by Chris Waddle or Johnny Wilkinson. Rapping this raucous, tapping your jaw, kids. I couldn't be more angered at Yorkers. You couldn't recognize a crisp rapper holding a packet of Walkers. Fuck that, you couldn't recognize your own dick. You're so thick, it's like a broke twig, mine's so big. I make a fat bitch feel